I'll give you my salary if you can translate this, mocked the millionaire CEO to the cleaning lady who had by mistake brought her daughter to work. Hi, my beautiful family. Let's start with a prayer. Dear God, please continue to guide my healing, strengthen my body, calm my heart, and bless my YouTube family, each soul who supports me with love, prayers, and kindness. Protect them and fill their lives with peace. Amen. This is your Mr. Peter. I'm still in New York receiving treatment, but I'll be back in just 2 days by God's grace. I know some of you may feel sad not hearing my voice today, and I truly feel that. But please, my family, don't leave the story in the middle. Stay till the end. Your love means everything, and please, like and comment. Even one like or one comment from you can help keep this channel alive. James is here with love, but I'm holding your hearts from afar. Now let's begin today's story with all the love we share.
Sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the cruelest moments, when two hearts discover each other in the depths of humiliation and find something worth fighting for. The October rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor like angry tears from heaven, each drop reflecting the cold fluorescent lights of Ian Nichols' corner office. At 45, Ian commanded his empire from behind a mahogany desk that cost more than most people's cars, his steel-gray eyes scanning quarterly reports with the precision of a predator. The numbers should have satisfied him. Nichols' Global Enterprises was thriving, his net worth climbing toward the billion-dollar mark. But satisfaction was a luxury Ian Nichols had forgotten how to feel. The clock on his desk showed 11:47 p.m., but sleep was for those who had something to dream about. Ian lived in a world of mergers, acquisitions, and board meetings, where emotions were weaknesses and human connections were merely transactions. His penthouse apartment waited empty 30 floors above, as sterile and lifeless as the man who inhabited it. "Mr. Nichols?" The tentative voice from his doorway made him look up sharply. A woman stood silhouetted against the hallway light, her cleaning cart beside her like a faithful companion. Even in the dim light, Ian could see she was beautiful in the way that working-class women often were, real, unpolished, with an honesty that money couldn't buy. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her uniform was clean but worn. What made Ian's breath catch, however, was the small figure hiding behind her legs. "I'm so sorry to disturb you, sir," the woman continued, her voice carrying a slight tremor. "I'm Jillian Sharman, the night cleaner. My babysitter canceled at the last minute, and I couldn't find anyone else. It's just for tonight, I promise. She'll be very quiet." The child, a little girl with enormous brown eyes and curly hair, peeked out from behind her mother's legs. She was clutching a small, battered stuffed rabbit and wearing a dress that had clearly been carefully mended more than once. Despite its age, the dress was immaculately clean, and there was something about the way the child held herself that spoke of careful upbringing and gentle discipline. Ian's first instinct was ice-cold fury, his building, his rules, his sanctity violated by this presumptuous cleaning woman and her spawn. But as he opened his mouth to deliver the cutting dismissal that would end both their evenings and probably her employment, his eyes fell on the yellowed envelope lying open on his desk, his grandmother's final gift, discovered just that morning in the safe deposit box he'd finally gotten around to clearing. Inside was a letter written in flowing French script, words that danced across the page like music he couldn't hear. The letters seemed to mock him, swimming and shifting whenever he tried to focus, just as they had since childhood. His expensive lawyers couldn't translate it, claiming it was too archaic. But Ian knew the truth. The words were his enemy, as they'd always been. His dyslexia had been a carefully guarded secret for 30 years, hidden behind wealth and power. But this letter, this final message from the one person who'd ever read to him without judgment, remained locked away like everything else he couldn't decode. An idea formed in his mind, cruel, petty, and completely unworthy of a man of his stature. But Ian Nichols had spent so many years building walls around his heart that cruelty had become his default language. "You," he said, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to absolute obedience. "Come here." Jillian's protective instincts flared immediately. She'd worked enough jobs for enough powerful men to recognize danger when she heard it. But she needed this position desperately, and her 6-year-old daughter Rhonda was already exhausted from the day's celebrations. "Yes, sir," she said, stepping forward but keeping Rhonda safely behind her. Ian picked up the letter, his movements deliberate and predatory. "Since you've seen fit to bring children into my office, perhaps you can make yourself useful." He held up the French letter, his smile sharp as a blade. "I'll give you my entire month's salary if you can translate this, but when you fail, and you will fail, you're fired for bringing that child here." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and suddenly the office felt charged with electricity. From the hallway, Ian's late-night staff began to filter in, drawn by the commotion. Beatrix Crenshaw, his sharp-tongued assistant, appeared first, her perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes making Jillian's simple uniform look even more shabby by comparison. "Oh my goodness," Beatrix said with false sweetness, her voice carrying clearly through the office. "Did someone actually bring their kid to work? How unprofessional." Harold Whitfield, the company's lead counsel, emerged from his office down the hall, briefcase in hand. "What's all this commotion, Ian? Some sort of security breach?" "Just the cleaning staff getting ideas above their station," Beatrix replied with a cruel laugh. "Apparently this one thinks she can translate French, probably can't even read English properly." Marcus Riverstone, head of security, joined the growing crowd. "Should I escort them out, Mr. Nichols? We can't have unauthorized personnel in the building after hours." The chorus of snickers and whispered comments began. "Look at that poor kid in those thrift store clothes. Trailer trash thinking they're smart. Probably welfare queens trying to scam their way into easy money. The child looks just as vacant as the mother." Each word was a carefully aimed arrow designed to wound, and Ian watched with cold satisfaction as Jillian's cheeks flushed red with humiliation. This was what happened when people forgot their place in his world. But something extraordinary happened next. Instead of crumbling, instead of fleeing with her daughter in tow, Jillian Sharman lifted her chin and stepped forward. Her brown eyes, which had seemed so gentle moments before, now blazed with quiet dignity and unmistakable intelligence. "May I see the letter, please?" she asked, her voice steady despite the cruel laughter surrounding her. Ian handed it over with a smirk, expecting to enjoy watching her stumble through a few words before admitting defeat. The assembled crowd leaned in, vultures waiting to feast on her humiliation. Jillian took the letter with hands that didn't shake, despite the pressure of a dozen hostile eyes upon her. She studied it for a moment, her brow furrowing in concentration, and Ian found himself oddly transfixed by the way her lips moved silently as she parsed the archaic French. Then, in a voice that seemed to turn language into liquid gold, she began to read, "Ma chère épouse bien-aimée, mon cœur qui bat dans ma poitrine." The French flowed from her lips like poetry made audible, each word perfectly pronounced with an accent that spoke of true understanding, not mere memorization. But it was when she began the translation that the impossible happened. She didn't just convert words, she breathed life into them. "My dearest beloved wife, my heart that beats within my chest. I write to you from the trenches of Normandy, where the guns never stop singing their terrible song. I have your photograph pressed against my heart, and it is the only thing that keeps the darkness at bay. Every morning I wake hoping this war will end, not because I fear death, but because I fear never holding you again, never kissing your sweet lips, never watching our children grow in the garden you planted behind our little house. For Ian, who had spent his life seeing words as enemies that shifted and swam before his eyes, watching this woman turn letters into love was like witnessing magic. She read words like music, and he'd been tone-deaf his whole life until this moment. The office had fallen completely silent. Even Beatrix's perpetual smirk had vanished, replaced by something approaching wonder. Gillian continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. The other soldiers mock me for carrying your letters everywhere, but they do not understand that love is the only thing that makes a man truly brave. When I charge into battle tomorrow, it will not be for king or country. It will be for the promise of returning to your arms. If God wills that I should fall, know that my last thought will be of you, my darling Marie, and of the love that made my brief life worth living. Forever yours, Jean-Baptiste. The silence that followed was profound and sacred. Ian found himself staring at this woman, this cleaning lady he'd been prepared to humiliate, with something approaching awe. She had not just translated the words, she had brought them to life, revealing the aching love and desperate hope of a man who had died 80 years ago. It's dated June 5th, 1944, Gillian added quietly, folding the letter carefully. The day before D-Day. I suspect Jean-Baptiste never made it home to his Marie. Harold Whitfield cleared his throat awkwardly. Beatrix seemed to have lost her voice entirely. Marcus looked at his shoes, suddenly uncomfortable with his earlier judgment. Ian, meanwhile, felt something crack inside his chest. A wall he'd built so carefully, so thoroughly, that he'd forgotten it was there. This woman had just accomplished something his team of highly paid experts couldn't do, and she'd done it with a grace and dignity that made his cruel test seem petty and small. But it was what happened next that would rewrite the story of Ian's guarded heart. Tears began to fall down Gillian's cheeks, not tears of humiliation or defeat, but tears of genuine emotion for the long-dead soldier and his Marie. She knelt down to her daughter's level, pulling the little girl close, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of every sacrifice love demands. Today is my daughter's 6th birthday, Mr. Nichols. I brought her with me tonight because I couldn't bear to leave her alone on her special day, and I couldn't afford to miss work. Her voice carried the music of dignity under pressure. I don't need your salary, sir. Money can't buy what I already have. A daughter who loves me and a love that makes me rich beyond measure. I just wanted to buy her a cake tomorrow and maybe a small toy. Please don't fire me. She's all I have in this world, and this job lets me take care of her. In that moment, Ian saw something he'd forgotten existed. A love so pure it transformed poverty into wealth, turned weakness into strength, made cleaning offices feel like building kingdoms. This woman possessed something his billions couldn't purchase, the ability to find light in darkness, to speak of love as if it were the only currency that mattered. The little girl, Rhonda, looked up at Ian with those enormous brown eyes, completely trusting despite the hostile crowd surrounding them. In that moment, Ian saw something he'd forgotten existed. Innocence, vulnerability, and the fierce protective love of a mother for her child. The cruelty of his test hit him like a physical blow. He'd tried to destroy this woman's dignity for sport, and instead she had shown him something beautiful, something real, something his cold world had been missing without his even knowing it. "Everyone out," he said quietly. "But Ian," Beatrix began. "Out. Now." The office emptied quickly, leaving only Ian, Gillian, and Rhonda in the sudden quiet. The rain continued its percussion against the windows, but somehow the sound seemed gentler now. Ian looked at this woman who had just accomplished the impossible, who had shown him grace under pressure and dignity in the face of cruelty. Something in his frozen heart began to thaw, and for the first time in years, Ian Nichols felt genuinely ashamed of himself. "I'm sorry," he said, the words foreign on his tongue. That was inexcusable. Jillian straightened, still holding her daughter's hand. Thank you for not firing me, Mr. Nichols. We'll go now and let you get back to your work. As she turned to leave, Ian felt panic rise in his throat. He couldn't let her go, not yet. Not when she'd just shown him something he hadn't even known he was looking for. Wait, he called out, his voice rougher than he intended. Where did you learn to translate like that? Jillian paused at the doorway, her back still turned. I used to be a student, Mr. Nichols, a long time ago. And then she was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of lavender soap and the echo of ancient love letters in the air. Ian sat alone in his office, staring at the letter that had changed everything, and wondered what other secrets the woman with gentle eyes and hidden depths might be carrying. For the first time in 15 years, Ian Nichols went to sleep thinking about someone other than himself. Outside, the rain finally stopped, and the first stars began to appear through the breaking clouds. Chapter 2. The Scholar's Secret. Some hearts carry wounds so deep that only love can heal them, and some secrets are so beautiful that they transform everyone who discovers them. The morning sun painted Jillian's tiny studio apartment in shades of gold and hope, but she barely noticed as she stood at the kitchen counter, carefully counting the crumpled bills from her tip jar. $23.47, enough for a small birthday cake from the grocery store bakery and maybe a coloring book for Rhonda. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. Mommy, is it really my birthday? Rhonda's sleepy voice drifted from the pull-out couch they shared, her dark curls a tangled halo against the faded pillows. It really is, sweetheart, Jillian replied, forcing brightness into her voice as she turned to face her daughter. Happy 6th birthday, my beautiful girl. Rhonda scrambled out of bed, her nightgown, a hand-me-down from their neighbor's daughter, twisted around her small frame. She launched herself into Jillian's arms with the pure joy that only children possess, and for a moment, all the worries about rent and groceries and whether she'd still have a job after last night's humiliation faded away. Can we have chocolate cake? Rhonda asked, her brown eyes, so much like her mother's, sparkling with anticipation. Chocolate cake it is, Jillian promised, pressing a kiss to the top of her daughter's head. But first, you need to get ready for Mrs. Rodriguez to pick you up for school. As Rhonda scampered off to brush her teeth, Jillian's smile faltered. Last night's encounter with Ian Nichols played through her mind like a recurring nightmare. The way he'd looked at her, first with cruel amusement, then with something that might have been respect, or perhaps just surprise. The laughter of his employees still echoed in her ears, each snicker a reminder of how far she'd fallen from the life she'd once imagined for herself. I used to be a student, Mr. Nichols, a long time ago. The words had escaped before she could stop them, a glimpse into a past she'd worked so hard to bury. But standing in that office, surrounded by hostile faces and cruel whispers, she'd felt like that girl again. The one who used to lose herself in dusty library stacks, who dreamed of teaching literature to bright-eyed students, who believed that love and intelligence could conquer anything. She'd been such a fool. 7 years earlier, Harvard University. The Widener Library had been Jillian's sanctuary, a cathedral of knowledge where she could escape the modest apartment she shared with 3 other scholarship students. At 23, she was the golden girl of the literature department, summa cum laude, recipient of the prestigious Thornwell Fellowship and already accepted to the PhD program with a full research assistantship. There's my brilliant girl, Christopher Manning had whispered that October afternoon, sliding into the chair beside her in the library's reading room. Even now, 8 years later, Jillian could still remember the way her heart had skipped at his words, the way his perfectly styled blonde hair caught the light filtering through the tall windows. Christopher was everything she'd never dared dream she could have, heir to the Manning shipping fortune, president of the Harvard Social Club, devastatingly handsome in the way that only came from generations of good breeding and better nutrition. That he'd chosen her, a scholarship student from a working-class family in Baltimore, had seemed like a miracle. "I have news," he'd said, his blue eyes dancing with excitement. "Father's agreed to let me take you to the autumn gala next weekend. The whole Boston elite will be there, senators, judges, old money families. You'll need a new dress, of course." Jillian had protested about the expense, but Christopher had waved her concerns away with the casual generosity of someone who'd never worried about money. "Consider it an early Christmas gift," he'd said, pulling her into his arms right there in the library. "I want to show you off, Gil. I want everyone to see how lucky I am." Those had been the golden months, stolen kisses between classes, weekend trips to the Manning family estate in the Hamptons, quiet evenings when Christopher would read her poetry by firelight in his dormitory room. He'd made her feel cherished, protected, like she was the heroine of her own fairy tale. The pregnancy test had changed everything. "You're certain?" Christopher had asked, his face draining of color as they sat in his car outside the campus health center. "Positive," Jillian had whispered, her hands shaking as she showed him the results. "But it's okay, Christopher. We'll figure this out together. Maybe we can move up the wedding." "Wedding?" The word had come out sharp, almost angry. "Jillian, we're not. I mean, we never talked about marriage. We're just kids ourselves." The first crack had appeared in her fairy tale then, small but significant. "I thought, the way you talked about our future, about introducing me to your family." "As my girlfriend," Christopher had said carefully. "Not my. Gil, you have to understand. My family has expectations. There are traditions, responsibilities. I can't just—" In her naive trust, Jillian had never questioned the timing, never doubted that the child was his. They'd been exclusive for months, or so she'd believed. Only later would she realize that Christopher's business trips and family obligations had provided ample opportunity for other relationships. He'd never finished that sentence, but Jillian had heard the unspoken words anyway. "I can't just marry a scholarship student and throw away my inheritance." The Manning family had acted swiftly and ruthlessly. First came the lawyers, offering her money, enough to take care of the problem and finish her education in comfort. When she'd refused, the threats had begun. Christopher's father had connections everywhere, on the Harvard Board of Trustees, in the academic world, in the media. One word from him could destroy her future before it began. "Just sign the papers, Jillian," Christopher had pleaded during their final meeting, his eyes refusing to meet hers. "Say the baby isn't mine. Take the money and disappear. We can both pretend this never happened." "How can you ask me to do that?" she'd whispered, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "This is our child, Christopher. Our baby." "It's a mistake," he'd replied, his voice hollow. "A mistake that will ruin both our lives if we don't fix it now." In the end, Jillian had chosen love over money, truth over convenience. But Christopher had chosen differently. He'd signed a legal document denying paternity. His family's lawyers had spread whispers of academic fraud and moral turpitude. And within a month, Jillian found herself expelled from Harvard on trumped-up plagiarism charges that she couldn't fight without resources she didn't have. 8 months later, she'd given birth to Rhonda in a county hospital in Baltimore, holding her daughter's tiny hand and promising that they would survive this together, that somehow she would build a life worthy of this perfect little soul. She'd kept that promise, even if the life she'd built looked nothing like the one she'd dreamed of. Present day, Nichols Global Enterprises. 42 floors above Jillian's apartment, Ian Nichols sat in his office staring at a computer screen filled with information that made his chest tight, with something he couldn't quite name. Marcus Riverstone had done his job with typical efficiency, compiling a comprehensive background report on Gillian Sharman in less than 12 hours. The facts were laid bare in cold, clinical language. Harvard University Literature Department, 3.97 GPA, summa cum laude graduate, recipient of multiple academic honors and fellowships. Then the abrupt end. Expelled just months before graduation, no explanation given in the official records. A baby born 8 months later, father listed as unknown. 8 years of minimum wage jobs, moving from city to city, always just scraping by. But it was the photograph that made Ian's breath catch. An image from the Harvard student newspaper, showing a young woman receiving some academic award. The smile was radiant, confident, full of dreams and possibilities. It was Gillian's face, but transformed by hope in a way Ian had never seen. What had happened to steal that light from her eyes? "Sir?" Beatrix appeared in his doorway, her usual smugness replaced by something more cautious. "I have the Morrison contract ready for your review." Ian barely glanced up. "Later." "But the deadline." "I said later." The snap in his voice made Beatrix retreat hastily, leaving Ian alone with his growing obsession. He couldn't stop thinking about last night, the way Gillian had stood so straight despite the cruelty surrounding her, the way she'd translated that letter with such emotion and skill, the way she'd put her daughter's needs above her own dignity. When was the last time someone had impressed him so thoroughly? When was the last time anyone had surprised him at all? More importantly, when was the last time he'd felt genuinely ashamed of his own behavior? The little girl's face haunted him too, those trusting brown eyes, the careful way she'd held her battered stuffed rabbit, the birthday dress that had clearly been mended with love and hope. Today was her birthday, and here he was, a billionaire sitting in his ivory tower, while that child was celebrating with whatever her mother could scrape together. The thought made him sick. Ian picked up his phone and dialed. "Marcus, I need you to do something for me, discreetly." "Of course, sir. I want you to go to FAO Schwartz. I don't know, what do 6-year-old girls like?" There was a pause. "Sir?" "Toys, Marcus. Birthday gifts. The best they have. Price is no object." Ian found himself pacing, energy coursing through him in a way it hadn't in years. "Books, too. Educational ones, but beautiful. Art supplies. A dollhouse. No, 2 dollhouses. One for now and one for when she outgrows the first. How many items would you like me to purchase?" Ian stopped pacing. How many gifts did a normal child receive for their birthday? He realized he had no idea. His own childhood birthdays had been cold, formal affairs, expensive gifts presented by servants, consumed in silence while his parents worked. "Enough to fill a car," he said finally. "And Marcus? Have them delivered to the building's lost and found office. Anonymous delivery, no return address. Make sure they're wrapped beautifully. Lost and found, sir." "People find things there sometimes," Ian said, surprising himself with the smile in his voice. "Amazing things, life-changing things." That evening, Gillian's apartment. Rhonda's birthday dinner had been simple but perfect. Spaghetti with marinara sauce, green beans from a can, and the small chocolate cake from the grocery store bakery. Rhonda had blown out 6 candles and made a wish, her eyes squeezed tight with concentration. "What did you wish for, sweetheart?" Gillian had asked, clearing the paper plates from their tiny table. "I can't tell you, or it won't come true," Rhonda had replied solemnly. But it was something really, really good. Now, with Rhonda finally asleep, Gillian sat at the table grading practice essays for the tutoring service that provided her day income. The pay was terrible, but at least it let her use her education for something meaningful. She was deep in correcting a student's analysis of Romeo and Juliet when her phone rang. "Gillian, it's Mrs. Chen from the building office." The voice was excited, almost breathless. "You need to come down here right away. Someone left a delivery for you in Lost and Found, but there's been some kind of mistake. There are boxes everywhere." Boxes? Jillian's heart skipped. Had someone complained about last night? Was she being evicted? "Just come down, honey. You need to see this." Jillian threw on her robe and slipped downstairs, leaving Rhonda sleeping peacefully. The building's small Lost and Found office was blazing with light, and Mrs. Chen was standing in the doorway with the expression of complete bewilderment. "I don't understand it," the older woman said, gesturing helplessly at the room behind her. "Someone called this morning, said they were delivering items for the Lost and Found. I thought maybe it was a few boxes of old clothes or something, but this—" Jillian stepped into the room and gasped. The small space was filled floor to ceiling with beautifully wrapped presents in pink and gold paper, each one tied with silk ribbons. There had to be dozens of them, some small enough to hold in one hand, others large enough that she'd need help carrying them. A card attached to the largest box simply read, "For the birthday girl who deserves magic." "There's no name," Mrs. Chen said, her voice full of wonder. "No return address. Someone just wanted a little girl to have the most amazing birthday in the world." Jillian's vision blurred with tears. She'd spent 6 years struggling to give Rhonda everything she needed, often failing to provide what she wanted. Now, suddenly, impossibly, someone had filled this room with miracles. "Can you help me get them upstairs?" she whispered. It took 4 trips to carry everything to their apartment. Jillian arranged the gifts around the pull-out couch where Rhonda slept, transforming their humble home into something magical. There were doll houses and art supplies, books and puzzles, dress-up clothes fit for a princess, and toys Jillian had only dreamed of buying. As she placed the last present, a beautiful wooden jewelry box with a dancing ballerina, next to Rhonda's pillow, Jillian felt something crack open in her chest. For 8 years, she'd carried the weight of their struggles alone, believing that no one cared about their small lives, their quiet dreams. But someone had seen them. Someone had noticed a little girl's birthday and decided it mattered enough to fill a room with wonder. Jillian knelt beside her sleeping daughter and whispered, "Tomorrow's going to be the most beautiful day, sweetheart. Someone out there thinks you're worth celebrating." She never suspected that 42 floors above, Ian Nichols was standing at his window, looking down at the city lights and wondering if a little girl named Rhonda was having sweet dreams. For the first time in years, both their hearts were full of hope. Chapter 3. Late-night conversations. The most beautiful conversations happen in the quiet hours when guards are down and hearts speak their truth, when two souls discover they've been waiting their whole lives to find each other. 3 weeks had passed since Rhonda's magical birthday morning, and Jillian still felt her heart skip whenever she remembered her daughter's face lighting up like sunrise as she discovered the room full of treasures. The mystery of their benefactor remained unsolved, but the gifts had done more than just bring joy. They had restored something precious that Jillian thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Now, as she pushed her cleaning cart down the marble corridors of Nichols Global Enterprises at 11:30 on a Thursday night, she found herself thinking about the man who had humiliated her in this very building just weeks ago. Ian Nichols had become a puzzle she couldn't solve, appearing in her thoughts at the most unexpected moments. Since that night, their encounters had been brief and strangely formal. A nod when he passed her in the hallway, a quiet "good evening" when she cleaned around his office while he worked late. Gone was the cruel mockery, replaced by something that looked almost like guilt, respect. Jillian couldn't be sure, but she'd caught him watching her sometimes, with an expression she couldn't decipher. Tonight felt different, though. The building hummed with an unusual energy, and as Jillian approached the executive floor, she could see light spilling from Ian's corner office like golden honey. She paused outside his door, vacuum cleaner in hand, uncertain whether to interrupt. "Come in." His voice was quieter than she remembered, lacking the sharp edge of command that had terrified her before. Gillian entered to find Ian standing at his floor-to-ceiling windows, silhouetted against the glittering tapestry of Manhattan at night. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his shirt sleeves, and something about his relaxed posture made him seem more human, less like the untouchable billionaire, and more like a man who might be lonely. "I can come back later if you're—" "No, please." He turned, and she was struck by how tired he looked. Not physically tired, but soul-deep exhausted in a way she recognized from her own mirror. "I was just thinking." Gillian began her routine, dusting the furniture with practiced efficiency while stealing glances at him. He'd settled into the leather chair beside his bookshelf, and she couldn't help but notice the titles: philosophy, literature, poetry, mixed in with the business texts, surprising choices for a man she'd assumed cared only for profit margins. "Les fleurs du mal," she said softly, her fingers tracing the spine with reverence. "Baudelaire. Beauty is the sole legitimate province of the poem. I wouldn't have expected—" Ian felt the familiar shame rise in his throat. "You wouldn't have expected a man like me to appreciate poetry? I can't properly read." The words escaped before he could stop them, and Gillian turned, seeing something vulnerable flicker across his features. "I meant," she said gently, "I wouldn't have expected someone who commands boardrooms to find time for beauty. Reading isn't about the mechanics, Mr. Nichols. It's about the soul recognizing truth. Some people see words, others feel them." Her response was like a key turning in a lock he'd thought was rusted shut forever. "I've always been better at feeling them than seeing them," he admitted quietly. "Then you understand poetry better than most," Gillian said, and for the first time in 30 years, Ian felt his dyslexia wasn't a weakness to hide, but simply another way his mind worked. "Once upon a time," she admitted, moving to dust the desk that separated them. "A lifetime ago." "What happened?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications. Gillian's hands stilled on the mahogany surface. How could she explain the fall from grace? The dreams that had crumbled, the choice she'd made to sacrifice everything for the tiny life growing inside her. "Life happened," she said finally. "Sometimes we don't get to keep the things we love most." Ian was quiet for a long moment, and when she glanced up, she found him studying her with something that looked like understanding. "I know something about that," he said softly. Against every instinct screaming at her to maintain professional distance, Gillian found herself asking, "Do you know about losing things you love?" A shadow crossed his features. "I lost my parents when I was 25, car accident on their way to my graduation from business school. I thought, I thought I'd have time to make them proud of me, time to show them that their investment in my education had been worth it." He paused, his fingers tracing the edge of a silver frame on his desk. "I threw myself into building this company afterward, told myself it was what they would have wanted. But sometimes I wonder if I was just running from the pain." The vulnerability in his admission took Gillian's breath away. Here was the man who commanded boardrooms and struck fear in his competitors, revealing the wounded son who still carried his parents' loss like a stone in his chest. "I'm sure they would have been proud," she said gently. "Look what you've built. How many people you employ. How many lives you've touched." Ian's laugh was bitter. "Have I touched lives? Or have I just accumulated wealth while keeping everyone at arm's length?" He gestured around the opulent office. "Sometimes I wonder if this is all there is. Endless meetings, contracts, acquisitions. I can't remember the last time I felt connected to anything real." Something in his tone broke Gillian's heart. She'd been so focused on survival, on being strong for Rhonda, that she'd forgotten there were different kinds of poverty. This man had everything money could buy and nothing that actually mattered. Connection isn't about grand gestures, she heard herself saying. It's about small moments, like reading a bedtime story or sharing a joke or just seeing someone, really seeing them. Is that what you miss most about your old life? Gillian considered the question, surprised by its thoughtfulness. I miss the conversations, the way ideas could come alive when you discussed them with someone who understood, who challenged you to think deeper. I miss feeling like my mind mattered. It does matter. The words came out more forcefully than Ian seemed to intend. Your translation that night. I've been thinking about it ever since. The way you brought that soldier's love to life made everyone in the room feel his pain and hope. That's not just intelligence, that's art. Tears pricked at Gillian's eyes. When was the last time someone had spoken to her like this? When had anyone acknowledged that she was more than just a cleaning lady, more than just a struggling single mother? Thank you, she whispered. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. They fell into a comfortable silence, the weight of mutual understanding settling between them. Gillian continued her work, but the atmosphere had shifted. The formal distance was dissolving, replaced by something warmer, more intimate. Tell me about your daughter, Ian said suddenly. Rhonda, isn't it? Gillian's face lit up instantly. She's incredible. 6 years old and already reading chapter books. She wants to be a teacher when she grows up so she can help kids learn about everything in the whole world. She laughed softly. Her curiosity is endless. Last week she asked me why the sky is blue, and when I tried to explain about light wavelengths, she asked why light has wavelengths in the first place. She sounds remarkable, like her mother. The compliment hung in the air, and Gillian felt heat rise in her cheeks again. This was dangerous territory, this growing warmth between them, this sense of connection she hadn't felt in years. She had the most amazing birthday, Gillian continued, deflecting from the personal. Someone, I still don't know who, left gifts for her in the buildings lost and found. Beautiful things, expensive things, a dollhouse that looks like a fairy tale castle, art supplies that would make a professional artist jealous. For a few hours, she felt like the most important little girl in the world. Ian's expression grew carefully neutral. How wonderful, a mysterious benefactor. I wish I knew who it was so I could thank them properly. They transformed her birthday into something magical. Gillian paused in her dusting, a thought occurring to her. Do you think it could have been someone from the building, maybe someone who overheard? Perhaps, Ian said quietly. Some people are moved by kindness even when they don't know how to express it directly. There was something in his tone that made Gillian look at him more closely, but his face revealed nothing. Still, a suspicion began to form in the back of her mind, a possibility too wonderful and too unlikely to voice. Mr. Nichols, she began hesitantly. Ian, he corrected. When it's just us, please call me Ian. The intimacy of his first name on her lips sent a shiver through her. Ian, why are you being so kind to me? After that first night, I expected. You expected me to fire you. Ian stood and moved to the window again, his hands clasped behind his back. I almost did. I was angry, embarrassed that someone had seen through my attempt at cruel entertainment. But then I kept thinking about what you said, about your daughter's birthday, about just wanting to take care of her. I realized I'd tried to humiliate someone whose only crime was loving her child enough to swallow her pride. He turned back to face her, and the regret in his eyes was unmistakable. I haven't been able to forget the way you stood there, so dignified despite everything we threw at you. You have more grace than anyone I've ever met, Gillian. You deserve better than the way I treated you. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer, and Gillian felt something dangerous unfurling in her chest. This man, this complicated, lonely, wounded man, was looking at her like she mattered, like she was worth seeing. I should go, she said suddenly, the moment becoming too intense to bear. "Let you get back to your work." "Stay," Ian said, the word escaping before he could stop it. At her surprised look, he added more carefully, "I mean, if you have time. I know you have other offices to clean, but, but I'd like to hear more about Baudelaire, and about your daughter's questions about light wavelengths, and about anything else you'd like to share." His smile was tentative, hopeful. "It's been a long time since I've had a real conversation with someone." Jillian hesitated, every rational thought telling her this was madness. She was the help. He was the billionaire CEO. This could only end in heartbreak. But when was the last time anyone had asked for her thoughts, her opinions, her dreams? When had anyone looked at her the way Ian was looking at her now? "I suppose I could stay for a few minutes," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. Ian's smile was radiant, transforming his entire face and giving her a glimpse of the man he might have been if life hadn't taught him to build walls around his heart. They talked until the security guard made his 2 a.m. rounds, discussing everything from French poetry to quantum physics to Rhonda's theory about why flowers smelled good. So the bees will want to visit them and accidentally carry flower powder to their friends. Ian was brilliant, funny, and surprisingly gentle, while Jillian found herself sharing thoughts and ideas she'd kept locked away for years. As she finally gathered her cleaning supplies to leave, Ian caught her hand gently. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For reminding me that there's more to life than balance sheets and board meetings. For making me remember what it feels like to actually connect with another human being." Jillian looked down at their joined hands, his elegant and soft from a life of privilege, hers worn and practical from years of hard work, and marveled at how perfectly they fit together. "Thank you for seeing me," she replied. "For the first time in years, I feel like I exist as more than just someone's mother or someone's employee." They stood there for a moment longer than necessary, reluctant to break the connection. Finally, Jillian pulled her hand free, knowing that if she didn't leave now, she might never want to. As she walked towards the elevator, she heard Ian call softly behind her. "Same time tomorrow night." She turned back, seeing hope and uncertainty warring in his expression. Against every instinct of self-preservation, she smiled. "I'd like that very much." The elevator doors closed between them, but Jillian could still feel the warmth of his hand on hers, could still see the way his eyes had lit up when she agreed to return. For the first time since Christopher's betrayal, she found herself looking forward to tomorrow. 42 floors below, she stepped out into the night air, unaware that Ian was still standing at his window, watching her small figure disappear into the city lights and counting the hours until he could see her again. Chapter 4. The Unexpected Proposal. When love begins to blossom, even the most practical arrangements can become the foundation for something beautiful and true. The morning light filtering through the executive floor's windows caught the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny stars, but Ian's attention was completely focused on the woman kneeling beside his bookshelf, carefully organizing the volumes that had somehow become scattered during their late-night conversations over the past 2 weeks. Jillian moved with quiet grace, her slender fingers trailing along the leather spines as she arranged them by author. She'd abandoned her cleaning cart 20 minutes ago in favor of what she called proper literary organization, and Ian found himself mesmerized by the way her face lit up when she discovered a particularly beloved title. "You have first editions of Dickens," she said, her voice filled with wonder as she cradled a copy of Great Expectations. "These must be worth a fortune." "They belonged to my grandmother," Ian replied, settling into his chair to watch her work. "She left them to me, though I suspect she would have preferred I actually read them rather than use them as office decoration." "Have you read them?" Jillian asked, glancing over her shoulder with that smile that had begun to haunt his dreams. Ian felt heat rise in his cheeks. I've been meaning to. Time always seems to slip away. Time doesn't slip away, Gillian said gently. We just fill it with things that matter less. She pulled the book from the shelf and held it out to him. Start with this one. Pip's story of love and loss, of learning what really matters in life. I think you'd find it relevant. Their fingers brushed as he took the book, and Ian felt that now familiar jolt of electricity that seemed to spark whenever they touched. Over the past fortnight, these moments had multiplied. Accidental contact as she handed him coffee, her hand on his shoulder when she leaned over to point out something interesting in a document, the way she'd briefly touched his arm when he'd shared a particularly painful memory about his parents. Each touch was innocent, professional, but underneath lay a current of something deeper, something that made Ian's carefully controlled world feel suddenly full of possibilities. Gillian, he said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. I want to offer you something. She turned from the bookshelf, her brown eyes curious. Oh? Ian stood and began pacing, nervous energy coursing through him. He'd been planning this for days, but now that the moment had arrived, he felt like a schoolboy asking someone to the dance. I've been thinking about our conversations, about your background in literature, your obvious intelligence and insight. He paused, running a hand through his hair. It's criminal that your talents are being wasted on cleaning when you could be doing so much more. A shadow crossed Gillian's face. Mr. Nichols, Ian, I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm not qualified for anything else. I never finished my degree, and even if I had, my record. Intelligence like yours shouldn't be wasted, Ian said, his voice rough with emotion. But more than that, you have a gift I've spent my life envying. You read words like they're love letters from the universe. Do you have any idea what that looks like to someone who's spent 30 years seeing letters as enemies? Gillian's breath caught. Ian ... I have severe dyslexia, he said simply, the words falling between them like stones in still water. Words swim and shift and mock me. I've built an empire despite being unable to read a simple sentence without aids, without adaptive software, without memorizing everything twice as hard as everyone else. His voice dropped to a whisper. But you make language into music. You don't just deserve this position, Gillian. You could teach me things about words that I've never learned. And in return? Her voice was carefully neutral, but Ian caught the wariness underneath. In return, you'd be well compensated, have excellent benefits, and work in an environment that respects your intelligence. Ian stopped pacing and faced her directly. This isn't charity, Gillian. This is recognition of your worth. For a long moment she was silent, her fingers worrying the hem of her uniform. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet and uncertain. I've heard this song before, Ian. A powerful man offering to change my life, to give me everything I've ever wanted. It didn't end well the last time. The pain in her voice made Ian's chest tight. Someone had hurt her badly, had used her hopes and dreams against her. The thought made him want to find whoever had done this and make them pay. I'm not him, Ian said softly. Whoever hurt you, whoever made you stop trusting in possibilities, I'm not him. How can I be sure? The question came out as barely a whisper. Ian moved closer, stopping just within arm's reach. Because I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I'm asking you to trust yourself. You're extraordinary, Gillian. You translate ancient French like you were born speaking it. You have insights into literature that would impress university professors, and you've raised a daughter who radiates joy and curiosity, despite every obstacle life has thrown at you. Tears gathered in Gillian's eyes. You make it sound so simple. Maybe it is simple. Maybe we've both been making it more complicated than it needs to be. Ian's voice grew gentler. What's the worst that could happen? If it doesn't work out, if you decide you want something different, you can leave. But if you never try, I'll never know what might have been, Jillian finished, echoing words she'd told herself countless times over the years. Exactly. Ian smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. Besides, I have selfish reasons for wanting you to say yes. Such as? I've gotten addicted to our conversations, to the way you see the world, the way you make me think about things differently. If you worked during the day, we could talk more. I could learn more from you. Learn from me? Jillian laughed, but it was tinged with disbelief. You're a billionaire CEO. What could I possibly teach you? How to be human again, Ian said simply. How to see beauty in small things. How to care about something more than profit margins. He paused, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. How to remember what it feels like to hope. The words hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Jillian searched his face, looking for deception, for the catch that would make this too good to be true. But all she saw was sincerity, vulnerability, and something that looked dangerously like tenderness. The salary you mentioned, she said finally. How substantial are we talking about? Ian named a figure that made Jillian's knees weak. It was more than she'd made in the past 3 years combined. Enough to move out of their tiny studio apartment, to put Rhonda in a better school, to finally breathe without constantly worrying about bills. That's too much. I couldn't possibly be worth— You're worth more, Ian interrupted. But it's what the position pays. Standard rate for personal assistants to executives at my level. Jillian turned back to the bookshelf, her mind racing. The practical part of her screamed to say yes, to grab this opportunity with both hands and never look back. But the scared part, the part that still carried Christopher's betrayal like a scar, whispered warnings about powerful men and their promises. There's something else, Ian said quietly. Something I want you to know before you decide. She turned back to him, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. These past 2 weeks, talking with you, getting to know you, it's been the best part of my days. Maybe the best part of my years. He took a step closer, his gray eyes intense. I'm not offering you this job because I pity you or because I want something from you. I'm offering it because I can't imagine going back to the way things were before I knew you existed. The honesty in his voice nearly undid her. This wasn't the polished businessman speaking. This was the lonely man she'd glimpsed in their late-night conversations, the one who'd lost his parents too young and built walls around his heart to survive. What about Rhonda? She asked, grasping for practical concerns to anchor herself. I can't afford daycare on top of everything else, and the hours— There's an excellent daycare on the 15th floor for employees' children. Full scholarships available for those who need them. Ian's smile was gentle. I may have already looked into it. You've been planning this. I've been hoping for it, he corrected. There's a difference. Jillian closed her eyes, feeling the weight of decision pressing down on her. Every instinct told her this was too risky, too much like the fairy tale that had shattered her world before. But when she opened her eyes and saw Ian watching her with such careful hope, she realized that maybe, just maybe, some fairy tales were worth the risk. I have conditions, she said finally. Relief flooded Ian's features. Name them. If I take this job, it's because I'm qualified, not because you feel sorry for me. I won't be treated differently because of whatever this is between us. Agreed. And Rhonda comes first. Always. If she needs me, if there's an emergency, if she's sick. She comes first, Ian confirmed. I wouldn't expect anything less from someone who loves as fiercely as you do. Jillian took a deep breath. Then yes, I'll take the job. Ian's smile was radiant, like sunrise breaking over the Manhattan skyline. Thank you. You won't regret this, I promise. I hope not, Jillian said softly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Because I'm terrified that I'm making the biggest mistake of my life. Or, Ian said, moving close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes, maybe you're about to start the most beautiful chapter yet. As she looked into his face, seeing hope and something deeper reflected there, Jillian thought that maybe, just maybe, he was right. Chapter 5. Falling Deeper. Love doesn't announce itself with trumpets and fanfare. It creeps in quietly through shared smiles, gentle touches, and the gradual realization that your heart has chosen its home. The transformation had been miraculous. In just 3 weeks since accepting Ian's offer, Jillian's entire world had shifted from black and white into brilliant technicolor. Gone were the midnight cleaning shifts and the constant worry about making ends meet. In their place was a life she'd never dared imagine, working in a sunlit office, using her mind for meaningful tasks, and watching Rhonda blossom in the building's exceptional daycare program. But the most remarkable change wasn't in her circumstances, it was in the way Ian looked at her now. The Morrison contract needs these clauses revised, Ian said, sliding a document across his desk to where Jillian sat, her laptop open and ready. Your insights yesterday about the ambiguous language in Section 12 were brilliant. Can you work your magic again? Jillian accepted the papers, her fingers briefly brushing his. Even after weeks of such innocent contact, the touch still sent electricity coursing through her veins. I'll have it ready by this afternoon. No rush, Ian said, his gray eyes warm with something that looked dangerously like affection. I know you want to pick up Rhonda early today for her ballet fitting. The fact that he remembered such details about her daughter's schedule made Jillian's heart flutter. Ian had seamlessly woven himself into the fabric of their small family's routine, asking about Rhonda's day, celebrating her small victories, and somehow making their happiness feel like his own priority. As if summoned by their conversation, a small knock sounded at the office door. Come in, Ian called, his entire demeanor softening in anticipation. Rhonda burst through the door like a ray of sunshine, her dark curls bouncing and her school uniform slightly rumpled from a day of 6-year-old adventures. She'd grown comfortable in this space over the past weeks, treating Ian's office like an extension of their own home. Mr. Ian, she exclaimed, running straight to him with the unguarded affection of childhood. Look what I made you. Ian's face lit up as he lifted Rhonda onto his lap, accepting the construction paper card she thrust at him, with the reverence most people reserved for priceless artwork. Let me see this masterpiece. Jillian watched from her chair, her heart swelling as Ian carefully examined Rhonda's creation, a wonky house drawn in crayon with 3 stick figures standing in front. A tall one, a medium one, and a tiny one with curly hair. That's you, and that's Mommy, and that's me, Rhonda explained, pointing to each figure. We're all together at our house. Our house, Ian repeated softly, his voice thick with emotion. Well, it's not our house yet, Rhonda amended with 6-year-old practicality. But maybe someday. Mommy says someday we might have a house with a yard where I can plant flowers and maybe get a puppy. Jillian felt heat rise in her cheeks. Rhonda, sweetheart, you can't just assume. I think that sounds like a wonderful dream, Ian interrupted gently, his eyes meeting Jillian's over Rhonda's head. Everyone should have a house with a yard and room for puppies. Do you have a puppy, Mr. Ian? Rhonda asked, settling more comfortably in his lap. No, I don't. My apartment is too small for pets. Rhonda looked at him with the kind of pity only children could express. That's very sad. Everyone needs something soft to cuddle. Ian's arms tightened around the little girl, and Jillian saw something vulnerable flicker across his features. You're absolutely right. I've been missing something soft to cuddle. The tenderness in his voice made Jillian's breath catch. This powerful man who commanded boardrooms and struck million-dollar deals was being undone by a 6-year-old's simple wisdom and artless affection. "Maybe you could share mine sometimes," Rhonda offered generously. "I have Mr. Bunny, and he's very good at cuddling. He might not mind if you borrowed him when I'm sleeping." "That's very generous of you," Ian said seriously. "I'd be honored to borrow Mr. Bunny for cuddles." Watching them together, Rhonda's small hands gesturing animatedly as she told Ian about her day, his patient attention to every word, the way he smoothed her curls with unconscious gentleness, Jillian felt her carefully constructed defenses crumbling. This wasn't the cold businessman who'd tried to humiliate her months ago. This was a man learning to love and being transformed by it. "Mommy, can Mr. Ian come to my ballet recital on Saturday?" Rhonda asked suddenly, turning to face Jillian with pleading eyes. "All the other kids have daddies coming, and I know Mr. Ian isn't my daddy, but maybe he could pretend just for the recital." The innocent request hit Jillian like a physical blow. In all her efforts to give Rhonda a stable, loving home, she'd never been able to fill the father-shaped hole in her daughter's life. Now, here was Ian, who'd somehow slipped into that role so naturally that Rhonda was asking him to play the part officially. "Sweetheart," Jillian began carefully, "Mr. Ian is very busy and—" "I'd love to come," Ian said quietly, his eyes never leaving Jillian's face. "If your mother agrees, there's nothing I'd rather do on Saturday than watch you dance." "Really?" Rhonda bounced in his lap with excitement. "You'll come see me be a butterfly?" "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Ian promised, and Jillian could see he meant every word. After Rhonda skipped back to daycare, promising to practice her butterfly steps, an awkward silence settled over the office. Jillian busied herself organizing files, acutely aware of Ian's gaze following her movements. "You don't have to come to the recital," she said finally, not looking up from her papers. "I know Rhonda put you on the spot." "She didn't put me on the spot." Ian's voice was gentle but firm. "I want to be there, Jillian. I want to be part of this, part of her life, part of yours." The words hung between them, loaded with implications that made Jillian's heart race. Ian, ... "I know this is complicated," he continued, rising from his desk to move closer to her. "I know you have reasons to be cautious, to protect yourself and Rhonda. But these past weeks, watching you bloom in this job, seeing Rhonda light up when she talks about her day, being part of your routine, it's been the best time of my life." He stopped in front of her chair, close enough that she could smell his cologne, could see the sincerity burning in his gray eyes. "I'm falling for you, Jillian," he said simply. "For both of you. And I hope, that maybe you're falling too." Jillian's breath caught. She'd been trying so hard to maintain professional boundaries, to convince herself that the electricity between them was just gratitude and proximity. But looking into his face now, seeing the vulnerability there, she couldn't lie to herself anymore. "This is dangerous," she whispered. "Why?" "Because you're you and I'm me. Because last time I trusted someone like you, it destroyed everything. Because Rhonda is already getting attached, and if this goes wrong—" Ian knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "What if it goes right?" The question was so simple, so full of hope, that it nearly broke her heart. "What if it doesn't?" "Then we'll deal with it together." "But Jillian, what if we spend so much time being afraid of what could go wrong that we miss what could go beautifully, amazingly right?" Looking into his eyes, Jillian saw everything she'd been trying to deny, the way he lit up when she entered a room, the careful attention he paid to Rhonda's stories, the gentleness with which he'd helped her rebuild her confidence. This wasn't charity or manipulation. This was a man falling in love as helplessly as she was. "Saturday," she said finally. "Saturday? Come to Rhonda's recital. We'll see how it feels to be whatever this is. Ian's smile was radiant. It's going to feel like coming home. As he leaned forward, his intention clear, Gillian felt her last defenses crumble. Their first kiss was soft, tentative, a question rather than a demand. When she kissed him back, answering his question with one of her own, Ian's arms came around her, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, becoming something desperate and necessary, 8 weeks of suppressed longing pouring out in a single perfect moment. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, their foreheads pressed together. "I've wanted to do that since the night you translated that letter," Ian confessed. "I've wanted you to," Gillian admitted. "God help me, I've wanted you to." They stayed there for a long moment, holding each other, both knowing that everything had just changed between them. There would be no going back to professional distance, no pretending that this was just a job anymore. "What happens now?" Gillian asked softly. "Now," Ian said, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead, "we see where this beautiful, terrifying thing takes us." Outside the office windows, Manhattan sparkled in the afternoon sun, but neither of them noticed. They were too busy discovering that sometimes, despite all the reasons to be afraid, love finds a way to bloom in the most unexpected places. Chapter 6. Their Secret World. Paradise isn't a place. It's the feeling of being completely known, completely accepted, and completely loved by the people who matter most. 3 months had passed since that first kiss in Ian's office, and Gillian woke each morning with the bewildering realization that her life had become something out of a fairy tale. Not the sanitized Disney version, but the real kind, messy, complicated, and more beautiful than she'd ever dared imagine. The Saturday morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ian's penthouse, where she and Rhonda had begun spending weekends. What had started as casual dinner invitations had evolved into something more domestic, more permanent. Their own small apartment sat mostly empty now, a safety net neither of them wanted to acknowledge they were keeping. "Butterfly pancakes," Rhonda announced from her perch on the kitchen counter, where she was helping Ian measure flour with the serious concentration of a master chef. "They have to be perfect butterflies or they won't taste right." "Of course they have to be perfect," Ian agreed solemnly, his hair mussed from sleep and his t-shirt dusted with flour. "We can't have imperfect butterfly pancakes. That would be a breakfast tragedy." Gillian watched from the doorway, her heart swelling as she observed this morning ritual they'd developed. Ian, who commanded billion-dollar corporations before most people had their coffee, was completely focused on helping a 6-year-old create the perfect butterfly-shaped pancakes. "Mommy," Rhonda spotted her and beamed. "Look what Mr. Ian taught me. You put the batter in a squeeze bottle and draw the wings first, then the body. It's like art you can eat." "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Gillian said, moving into the kitchen and accepting the coffee Ian handed her, perfectly prepared with the exact amount of cream she preferred. Such small attentions, accumulated over weeks, had become the foundation of something profound. "Your turn," Ian said, offering her the squeeze bottle with a playful grin. "Show us your artistic skills." "I'm terrible at this kind of thing," Gillian protested, but she accepted the bottle anyway. Under Ian's patient guidance and Rhonda's enthusiastic coaching, she managed to create something that vaguely resembled a butterfly. "It's perfect," Ian declared, his hand settling on the small of her back in the casual, intimate way that had become second nature. "A masterpiece." "You're biased," Gillian laughed, leaning into his touch. "Completely," he agreed, pressing a soft kiss to her temple. "Hopelessly, embarrassingly biased." These were the moments that undid her, not the expensive dinners or lavish gifts, but the quiet domesticity of Saturday morning pancakes, the way Ian looked at Rhonda like she was the most fascinating person in the world, the gentle touches that spoke of belonging. After breakfast, they settled in the living room for what had become their weekend tradition. Ian sat in the corner of the massive sectional sofa, Gillian curled against his side, while Rhonda sprawled across both their laps with a stack of books. "Which story today, Princess?" Ian asked, his fingers combing gently through Rhonda's curls. "The one about the brave princess who saves the dragon," Rhonda declared without hesitation. "Ah, my favorite," Ian said, and Gillian knew he meant it. In all the books Rhonda chose, she gravitated toward stories of strong heroines and unexpected friendships, perhaps unconsciously mirroring her own life. As Ian began to read, his deep voice bringing the characters to life, Gillian found herself studying his profile. The sharp angles of his face had softened over these months, the perpetual tension he'd carried in his shoulders gradually melting away. Love was transforming him just as surely as it was transforming her. "Daddy Ian, you do the dragon voice differently today," Rhonda observed, looking up at him with curious brown eyes. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Rhonda had called him Daddy Ian so naturally, so unconsciously, that Gillian wasn't sure the little girl even realized what she'd said. But Ian went very still, and when Gillian looked at his face, she saw tears gathering in his eyes. Is that okay?" Rhonda asked uncertainly, picking up on the sudden emotional shift. "That I called you Daddy Ian? I know you're not my real daddy, but you feel like one sometimes." Ian's voice was rough when he answered. "It's more than okay, sweetheart. It's the greatest honor anyone has ever given me." "Really?" Rhonda's face lit up. "So I can keep calling you that?" "I would love nothing more," Ian said, pulling her into a fierce hug. Over Rhonda's head his eyes met Gillian's, and the love and gratitude she saw there nearly stopped her heart. This was what she'd been afraid to hope for, not just a man who loved her, but one who loved her daughter with the same fierce devotion. Ian wasn't playing house or humoring a child. He was genuinely, completely invested in being the father Rhonda had never had. "I love you, Daddy Ian," Rhonda said simply, settling back into his arms. "I love you too, Princess," Ian replied, his voice thick with emotion. "More than all the stars in the sky." That afternoon, while Rhonda napped in what had become her room in Ian's penthouse, Gillian found herself standing on the terrace, looking out over Central Park. The autumn leaves were turning, painting the trees in shades of gold and crimson that rivaled any masterpiece. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Ian's voice came from behind her, and she felt his arms slip around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "Just thinking about how surreal this all feels," she admitted, relaxing into his embrace. "6 months ago, I was scrubbing floors and worrying about making rent. Now, dot, dot, dot. Now, now I'm standing on a terrace that costs more than most people make in a year, watching my daughter sleep in a room that looks like a princess's castle, being held by a man who—" She trailed off, the words catching in her throat. "A man who, what?" Ian prompted gently. "A man who loves us," she finished quietly. "Really, truly loves us. Not who he wants us to be, not some idealized version, but exactly who we are." Ian turned her in his arms, his gray eyes serious. "Is that so hard to believe?" "It is for me," Gillian admitted. "I've spent so many years expecting the other shoe to drop, waiting for the moment when this all becomes too good to be true." "What would it take for you to believe this is real?" Ian asked. "That we're real?" Gillian studied his face, seeing nothing but sincerity and patience. "Time, I suppose, and proof that you won't run when things get difficult." "Things are going to get difficult." "They always do," Gillian said with a sad smile. "Life has a way of testing happiness, seeing if it's strong enough to survive." Ian was quiet for a moment, considering her words. Then he reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the line of her cheekbones. "Then let it test us," he said simply. "Let life throw whatever it wants at us. We'll face it together." "You say that now, but—" "Gillian, His voice was firm, cutting through her protest. "I'm not him. I'm not the man who hurt you, who made you believe that love comes with conditions and expiration dates. I'm here, I'm staying, and nothing is going to change that." Looking into his eyes, Jillian felt something loosen in her chest, some tightly held fear finally beginning to release. Maybe, just maybe, she could trust this. Trust him. Trust them. "I love you," she said, the words slipping out before she could second-guess them. Ian's smile was radiant. "Say it again. I love you, Ian Nichols. Despite every reason I had to protect my heart, despite every fear I've carried, I love you. And I love you, Jillian Sharman. I love your strength and your vulnerability, your brilliant mind and your generous spirit. I love the way you make pancakes into art and the way you read bedtime stories with different voices for every character. I love that you see beauty in old books and hope in impossible situations." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And I love that you trusted me enough to let me into your world, to let me love your daughter, to let me become part of your family." Their kiss was different this time, not the desperate passion of new lovers, but something deeper, more settled. The kiss of two people who had chosen each other, who were ready to build something lasting. When they broke apart, both were smiling. "What happens now?" Jillian asked, echoing the question she'd posed months ago in his office. "Now we keep building," Ian said. "Day by day, moment by moment, we keep building this beautiful life together." From inside the penthouse, they heard Rhonda's voice calling for them, and they turned toward the sound with matching smiles. "Coming, Princess," Ian called back, his hand finding Jillian's as they walked toward their daughter. Their daughter. The thought sent warmth flooding through Jillian's chest. Somewhere along the way, they'd stopped being three separate people and had become something new, a family. As they rejoined Rhonda, who was rubbing sleepy eyes and asking for juice, Jillian marveled at the ordinary magic of the moment. This was what happiness looked like, not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but Saturday afternoon light filtering through windows, the sound of a child's laughter, and the steady presence of love that had grown strong enough to weather any storm. Outside the penthouse windows, Manhattan hummed with its usual energy, but inside their small sanctuary, time seemed to slow, allowing them to savor every precious moment of their unexpected paradise. Chapter 7. The storm clouds gather. Sometimes the greatest threats to love come not from outside forces, but from the shadows of our own past, rising like ghosts to claim what we thought we'd left behind. The first crack in their perfect world appeared on a Tuesday morning in November, delivered by a man in an expensive suit who walked into Ian's office like he owned it. Jillian looked up from her laptop, where she'd been reviewing contracts, to see a stranger standing in the doorway. He was tall, blond, and undeniably handsome in the way that only came from generations of privilege and good breeding. Everything about him screamed old money, from his perfectly tailored Armani suit, to the platinum watch on his wrist, to the confident way he surveyed the room as if calculating its worth. "I'm sorry, sir, but Mr. Nichols is in a meeting," Jillian said, rising from her desk. "If you'd like to make an appointment." The man's blue eyes fixed on her, and Jillian felt her blood turn to ice. She knew those eyes. She'd once looked into them with love and trust, believing they reflected her own dreams back at her. "Hello, Jill," Christopher Manning said with the same charming smile that had once made her heart race. Now it made her stomach clench with dread. "You look different, healthier. Success suits you." Jillian's mouth went dry. "What are you doing here, Christopher?" "I could ask you the same thing," he said, moving further into the office with the casual arrogance she remembered too well. "Though I suppose congratulations are in order. You've certainly landed on your feet. Executive assistant to Ian Nichols himself. Very impressive for someone with your background." The emphasis on the word background carried all the old condescension, all the implied superiority that had once made her feel small and grateful for his attention. But she wasn't that naive girl anymore. "I asked what you're doing here," Gillian repeated, her voice steadier than she felt. Christopher smiled, settling into one of the leather chairs as if he'd been invited. "I'm back from London. Father's estate is finally settled, and I'm taking over the family business. Amazing how death clarifies things, isn't it? Makes you realize what you've been missing." His smile turned predatory. "What you've been denied." "I'm sorry for your loss," Gillian said automatically, though she felt no genuine sympathy. Christopher's father had been as cold and manipulative as his son. "Are you?" Christopher's eyes gleamed with something that looked like amusement. "I wonder. But that's not why I'm here, Jill. I'm here because of our daughter." The words hit Gillian like a physical blow. "She's not your daughter. You signed papers." "Papers I was coerced into signing by my father," Christopher interrupted smoothly. "Papers that have no legal standing now that the circumstances have changed. I've spoken to my lawyers, Gil. I have rights." "You have no rights," Gillian said, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "You abandoned us. You denied her existence. You have no claim." "I have every claim," Christopher said, his voice hardening. "She's my blood, my heir. The Manning line doesn't end with me anymore, thanks to our indiscretion." The casual way he dismissed their relationship, reduced their daughter to an indiscretion, made rage flood through Gillian's veins. "Get out." "I don't think you understand the situation," Christopher continued as if she hadn't spoken. "I've done my research, Gil. I know about your little arrangement here, about the way you've been playing house with Nichols. Very cozy, very domestic. But what happens when he gets bored? When he realizes you're just the help who got above her station? That's not, isn't it?" Christopher's smile was cruel now. "You think this is real? You think a man like Ian Nichols is going to marry his cleaning lady and adopt her bastard child? You're a novelty, Gil, a temporary distraction. But I'm offering you something permanent." Gillian felt sick, Christopher's words echoing every fear she'd tried to suppress over the past months. "I want you to leave. Now." "I'm not going anywhere," Christopher said, his voice taking on the steely quality she remembered from their worst fights. "That little girl is mine, and I'm going to claim her. The question is whether you want to do this the easy way or the hard way." "What's that supposed to mean?" Christopher reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder, placing it on Ian's desk. "Custody papers. I'm filing for full custody of Rhonda Manning. Yes, I'm giving her my name, as she should have had from the beginning. My lawyers are very good, Gil. Very expensive. And they're confident we can prove you're an unfit mother." "Unfit?" Gillian's voice cracked. "I've done everything for her, sacrificed everything." "You've exposed her to an unstable lifestyle," Christopher said coldly, "moving from job to job, apartment to apartment. Now you're living with a man you barely know, letting him play daddy to my child. What kind of message does that send?" "Ian loves her. Ian is using you both," Christopher snapped. "And when he's done, where will that leave Rhonda? With a mother who has no education, no prospects, no future. I can give her everything, Gil. The best schools, the finest clothes, connections that will set her up for life. I can give her the Manning name and all that comes with it." Gillian stared at the custody papers, the legal language blurring through her tears. "Why now?" "Why after all these years?" "Because I finally can," Christopher said simply. "Father's gone. The money is mine, and I'm tired of pretending that mistakes don't have consequences. Rhonda is my consequence, and I'm ready to claim her. She doesn't even know you exist. She will, and she'll learn to love me, just as she's learned to love Nichols. Children are adaptable." The office door opened suddenly, and Ian strode in, his expression shifting from pleased to deadly serious as he took in the scene. "What's going on here?" Christopher rose smoothly, extending a manicured hand. "You must be Ian Nichols, Christopher Manning. I believe you know my former fiancée." Ian's eyes flicked between Christopher and Gillian, taking in her pale face and shaking hands. He didn't take Christopher's offered hand. "I think you should leave." "Actually, I think we should talk," Christopher said, his smile sharp as a blade. "Man to man. About Gillian. About our daughter. About the situation you've inserted yourself into." "Our daughter?" Ian's voice was dangerously quiet. "Didn't she tell you?" Christopher's feigned surprise was perfectly crafted. "Little Rhonda is mine, Mr. Nichols. My blood, my responsibility, and I'm here to reclaim what's mine." Gillian watched Ian's face change, saw the moment when Christopher's words hit home. Not doubt about her, she realized with relief, but protective fury that someone would threaten the child he'd come to love as his own. "You're not taking her anywhere," Ian said, his voice deadly calm. "I think you'll find I have every legal right—" "You have no rights," Ian interrupted. "Legal or otherwise. You abandoned them both. That makes you nothing more than a sperm donor with delusions of importance." Christopher's mask slipped for a moment, revealing the ugly anger underneath. "Be very careful, Nichols. I have resources you can't imagine, connections that go back generations. This isn't a battle you want to fight." "Watch me," Ian said, moving to stand beside Gillian, his hand settling protectively on her back. "You think your money can buy you a family?" Christopher laughed. "You think you can play house with my cast-offs and call it love? She's using you, Nichols. Just like she tried to use me. The only difference is, I was smart enough to see through it." Ian took a step forward, his hands clenched into fists, but Gillian caught his arm. "Don't," she whispered. "He's not worth it." Christopher collected his briefcase, his composure restored. "Think about my offer, Jill. Full custody, substantial financial support for you, a clean break that lets everyone move on with their lives. Or we do this in court, where every detail of your sordid little history gets aired for the world to see." He paused at the door, his smile returning. "Oh, and Nichols? When this all falls apart, and it will, remember that I warned you. Some people are just born for better things, and some people aren't. The tragedy is when they don't know the difference." After he left, the office fell into heavy silence. Gillian sank into her chair, her entire body shaking with the aftermath of adrenaline and terror. "Gillian," Ian said softly, kneeling beside her chair. "Look at me." She raised her eyes to his, expecting to see doubt, suspicion, or worse, the beginning of withdrawal. Instead, she saw only love and fierce determination. "He's not taking her," Ian said simply. "We won't let him." "We?" The word came out as a whisper. "We," Ian confirmed. "You, me, and Rhonda. We're a family, and families protect each other." Gillian felt tears spill down her cheeks. "Ian, you don't understand. He has money, lawyers, connections. He can make this very ugly, very public. Your reputation, your business." "I don't care about any of that," Ian said fiercely. "I care about you and Rhonda. That's all that matters." "He's going to try to destroy us." Ian's smile was grim but determined. "Then he's going to be very disappointed, because I didn't build this empire by backing down from bullies, and I'm not about to start now." As Ian pulled her into his arms, Gillian felt a flicker of hope amid the terror. Maybe Christopher was right that she'd landed above her station, that this happiness was too good to last. But looking into Ian's eyes, seeing the unwavering love and determination there, she realized that some things were worth fighting for, even if the battle ahead threatened to tear their world apart. Chapter 8. The Darkest Hour. Sometimes love requires the ultimate sacrifice, not the dramatic gesture of dying for someone, but the infinitely harder choice of walking away to save them. The photographs arrived on a Thursday morning, slipped under Jillian's apartment door like poison seeping through the cracks. Her hands trembled as she stared at the images, herself and Ian at dinner, kissing in Central Park, Rhonda laughing as Ian pushed her on the swings. Moments of private joy turned into weapons of destruction. The note attached was written in Christopher's familiar handwriting. Thought you might like some family photos. The press will find them quite interesting, don't you think? See. Jillian's phone rang, and she answered without checking the caller ID. I hope you liked my little gift. Christopher's voice was silk over steel. Those were taken over the past 2 weeks. Amazing what a good private investigator can capture when people think they're invisible. What do you want? Jillian's voice was barely a whisper. I want what's mine. But since you seem determined to make this difficult, I thought I'd help you understand the stakes. His tone grew colder. Page 6 of tomorrow's Post will feature a lovely story about Ian Nichols and his cleaning lady lover. From rags to riches, Billionaire's gold-digging romance has such a nice ring, don't you think? Jillian's stomach dropped. You wouldn't. I already have. But that's just the beginning, Gil. I have documentation of every sordid detail. Your expulsion from Harvard, the circumstances of Rhonda's birth, your years of minimum wage jobs. By the time I'm finished, you'll be painted as exactly what you are. A gold digger who trapped a lonely billionaire with her bastard child. Ian won't believe it. Ian might not, but his board will. His investors will. His competitors will have a field day with this. Christopher's laugh was cruel. Amazing how quickly a business empire can crumble when public confidence is shaken. How many people do you think will lose their jobs when Nichols Global's stock price tanks? The threat hit home with devastating accuracy. Ian's company employed thousands of people, supported countless families. Could she really be responsible for destroying all of that? But it doesn't have to come to that, Christopher continued smoothly. Sign over custody of Rhonda, take the settlement I'm offering, and disappear. The story dies, Nichols keeps his reputation, and everyone wins. Everyone except Rhonda. Rhonda will have everything money can buy. The best education, social connections, a future that extends beyond whatever scraps you can manage to provide. After Christopher hung up, Jillian sat in her empty apartment. She and Rhonda had been staying at Ian's penthouse, but she'd maintained the lease as a safety net, staring at the photographs scattered across her coffee table. Each image showed a moment of happiness that Christopher would twist into something ugly, predatory. The worst part was that some small, poisonous voice in her head whispered that maybe he was right. Maybe she was reaching above her station. Maybe she would end up costing Ian everything he'd worked for. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ian. Can't wait to see you and Rhonda tonight. Made reservations at that little Italian place she loves. Our table, 7 p.m. Our table. As if they were a real family, as if this was permanent, as if love was enough to overcome the vast difference in their worlds. Jillian's hands shook as she typed back, Something's come up. Can we reschedule? The response came immediately. Everything okay? I can come over. Number. Just need some time to think. There was a long pause before his reply. Jillian, you're scaring me. What's wrong? Instead of answering, Jillian turned off her phone. The next morning, the story hit exactly as Christopher had promised. Jillian stood at a newsstand staring at her own face on the front page of the New York Post. The headline screamed, Made to Millionaire, Billionaire CEO's Cinderella Story or Gold-Digging Scandal. The article was a masterpiece of character assassination disguised as human interest. It painted her as a calculating woman who'd deliberately placed herself in Ian's path, using her daughter as bait to trap a lonely billionaire. Every detail of her past was twisted into evidence of manipulation. Her academic background became proof of her intelligence at deception. Her years of struggling became evidence of desperation. Even her love for Rhonda was portrayed as mercenary calculation. The photographs showed them at their most intimate moments, but the captions told a different story. Ian's tender smile as he watched Rhonda became billionaire besotted with employee's child. Their kiss in the park became public displays of affection fuel speculation about gold digger's success. By noon, the story had been picked up by every major news outlet. Social media exploded with commentary ranging from fairy tale romance to predatory opportunism. The general consensus seemed to be that no cleaning lady could possibly deserve a billionaire's love. She had to be scheming for something. Jillian's phone had been ringing non-stop. Reporters, gossip bloggers, even talk shows wanting interviews. She'd turned it off after the fifth call from someone wanting to know how it felt to hit the jackpot. But it was the knock on her door that made her blood freeze. "Mrs. Sharman?" The woman standing in her hallway was professionally dressed, carrying an official-looking briefcase. "I'm Jennifer Walsh from Child Protective Services. I need to speak with you about your daughter." Jillian's legs nearly gave out. "I'm sorry, what?" "We've received reports about your living situation, about potential instability that might affect your child's welfare. I need to ask you some questions and observe the home environment." "Reports from whom?" Jennifer Walsh's expression was carefully neutral, but Jillian could see the judgment in her eyes. "That's confidential. May I come in?" The next hour was a nightmare of invasive questions and thinly veiled accusations. Where was Rhonda staying? How much time did she spend with Mr. Nichols? Had there been any inappropriate behavior? Was Jillian using her relationship with Ian to improve her financial situation? Every answer Jillian gave seemed to dig the hole deeper. Yes, they stayed at Ian's penthouse most nights. Yes, he paid for Rhonda's daycare and other expenses. Yes, their relationship had benefits beyond the emotional. "I love him," Jillian said desperately. "And he loves us. We're not hurting anyone." "Love isn't the issue here, Mrs. Sharman. The issue is stability and appropriate boundaries. Children need consistency, not to be moved between households based on their mother's romantic relationships." When Jennifer Walsh finally left, she took with her a piece of paper that made Jillian's world collapse, a temporary custody evaluation order. Rhonda would need to be interviewed by a court-appointed psychologist. Their living arrangements would be monitored. And until the evaluation was complete, any significant changes to Rhonda's environment, like a potential marriage or adoption, were prohibited. Jillian sank onto her couch, surrounded by the photographs Christopher had sent and the newspaper clippings that painted her as a predator. Everything she'd built, everything she'd dared to hope for, was crumbling around her. Her phone buzzed with another text from Ian. "Where are you? I've been calling for hours. We need to talk about this newspaper nonsense." Newspaper nonsense. As if it were that simple, as if love could overcome public scandal and legal challenges and the weight of a system designed to keep people like her in their place. Another text. "Jillian, please, whatever you're thinking, we'll handle it together. Don't shut me out." Together. The word that had once filled her with hope now felt like a lie, because the truth was, there was no together that didn't cost Ian everything. No together that didn't hurt the thousands of people who depended on his company. No together that didn't put Rhonda in the crosshairs of a custody battle she couldn't win. Jillian picked up a pen and began to write. "Ian, I can't do this anymore. I can't be responsible for destroying your life, your business, your reputation. I thought love would be enough, but I was naive. Christopher was right. Some people are born for better things, and some people aren't. The tragedy is when they don't know the difference. Rhonda and I are leaving New York. Please don't try to find us. This is better for everyone, especially you. You deserve someone who can stand beside you without bringing scandal and chaos into your world. Thank you for showing me what love could look like, even if I can't keep it. Always, Jillian. She sealed the letter in an envelope, gathered the few possessions that mattered, and prepared to pick up Rhonda from Ian's daycare for the last time. As she closed the door on her apartment, on the life she dared to dream of, Jillian whispered the words that had become her mantra. Love isn't about deserving each other. It's about protecting each other. She was wrong about many things that night. She was wrong about Ian's strength, wrong about love's fragility, wrong about her own worth. But she was right about one thing. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go, even when it destroys you, even when every instinct screams that you're making the biggest mistake of your life. The bus pulled away from Manhattan as dawn broke over the city, carrying with it a woman who'd learned to read the language of love perfectly, but had forgotten how to believe in happy endings. Behind her, in a penthouse office, a man sat surrounded by words he couldn't read, finally understanding that the only text that mattered had just walked out of his life. Chapter 9. Love's True Test. True love isn't measured by grand gestures in perfect moments, but by the choice to fight for each other when everything seems hopeless and the whole world stands against you. Ian stared at Jillian's letter for the 100th time in 3 days, the paper now worn soft from his desperate handling. Each word was a knife to his heart, but it was the phrase that haunted him most. You deserve someone who can stand beside you without bringing scandal and chaos into your world. She thought she was protecting him. The realization hit him like a physical blow every time he read those lines. This woman, this brave, brilliant, extraordinary woman, believed that loving him was a burden she had to carry alone. "Any word from the investigators?" Marcus Riverstone asked from his position by the office window. Ian's head of security had been working around the clock for the past 72 hours, following every lead, checking every possible destination. "Nothing concrete," Ian replied, his voice hoarse from exhaustion and grief. "They found evidence she and Rhonda took a bus to Philadelphia, but the trail goes cold after that. She's being careful, covering her tracks. She can't hide forever, not with a 6-year-old. She shouldn't have to hide at all." Ian's fist clenched around the letter. "This is my fault. I should have protected them better, should have anticipated that Christopher would escalate." "You couldn't have known. I should have known," Ian exploded, rising from his chair to pace the office like a caged animal. "I grew up in this world, Marcus. I know how vicious it can be, how quickly it can destroy anyone who doesn't belong. I let myself believe that love would be enough, that I could shield them from all of this." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to do?" Ian stopped pacing, his jaw set with determination. "I want to destroy Christopher Manning, completely. And then I want to find my family and bring them home. The board is meeting tomorrow about the media situation. There's talk of asking for your resignation until this blows over." "Let them try." Ian's voice was deadly calm. "I built this company from nothing, and I'm not going anywhere. But first, I need you to arrange a meeting with Christopher. Tonight." "Ian, that might not be wise." "I'm done being wise. I'm done playing by rules that were designed to keep people like Jillian from having the happiness they deserve." Ian's gray eyes blazed with purpose. "Christopher Manning wants to play dirty. Fine. He's about to learn that he picked the wrong fight." The meeting took place in the elegant bar of the Saint, Regis Hotel, neutral territory that suited both men's need for discretion. Christopher sat at a corner table, nursing a whiskey and wearing the satisfied smile of a man who believed he'd already won. "Ian," he said pleasantly as Ian approached, "I have to say I'm surprised to hear from you. I assumed you'd be licking your wounds and trying to salvage what's left of your reputation." Ian slid into the opposite chair, his expression carefully controlled. "Actually, I wanted to thank you." Christopher's eyebrows rose. "Thank me? For showing me exactly what kind of man I was dealing with, for making it clear that this isn't about Rhonda's welfare or Jillian's happiness. It's about your wounded pride and need for control." "I have no idea what you mean." "Of course you don't." Ian's smile was sharp as a blade. "Tell me, Christopher, how long did it take you to orchestrate all of this?" The media campaign, the CPS report, the carefully timed character assassination. Quite an impressive operation. Christopher shrugged, not bothering to deny it. "I told you I had resources. You chose not to listen." "I chose to underestimate you. That was my mistake." Ian leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "But here's what you underestimated about me. I don't just have money, Christopher. I have power, real power. And when someone threatens my family, I use it." "Your family?" Christopher laughed. "They're gone, Ian. Jillian saw sense and took my daughter where she belongs. You're fighting for ghosts." "Am I?" Ian pulled out his phone and placed it on the table. "Marcus, you're on speaker. Would you mind sharing what you discovered about Mr. Manning's recent activities?" Marcus's voice crackled through the phone's speaker. 3 offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, all showing suspicious money transfers in the past 6 months, financial records indicating tax evasion dating back 5 years, and most interesting evidence of bribes paid to academic officials at Harvard University to ensure Miss Sharman's expulsion 8 years ago. Christopher's face had gone pale. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Ian's smile was predatory now. "Oh, and Marcus found something else fascinating. Want to tell him about the paternity test, Marcus?" DNA evidence from hair samples obtained from Mr. Manning's apartment confirmed that he is not Rhonda Sharman's biological father. The tests show a 0% probability of paternity. The whiskey glass slipped from Christopher's hand, shattering on the marble floor. "That's impossible. I was told—" "The timing. Is it? Or did you simply assume, like many men do, that proximity equals paternity? You were sleeping with multiple women that semester, Christopher. Jillian was just the one whose pregnancy you couldn't ignore. Is it? Or is it possible that you knew all along that Rhonda wasn't yours, but you used Jillian's youth and inexperience to convince her otherwise? Used your family's power to destroy her life for the simple crime of believing you loved her?" Christopher was silent, his composure finally cracking. "Here's what's going to happen," Ian continued, his voice deadly calm. "You're going to withdraw your custody suit. You're going to publicly admit that your claims about Rhonda were false. You're going to pay for every investigator you hired, every reporter you bribed, every life you've disrupted in your pathetic attempt to control people who want nothing to do with you. And if I refuse, then the IRS gets an anonymous tip about your tax evasion. The FBI gets information about those bribes. Your business partners learn about your offshore accounts. And every major newspaper in the country gets the real story about Christopher Manning. Not the grieving heir claiming his daughter, but the vindictive sociopath who destroyed a young woman's life because she wouldn't submit to his demands." Christopher stared at him, realizing that his own weapons were being turned against him. "You can't prove any of this. I already have. The only question is whether you want to face these consequences privately or publicly." Ian stood, dropping a business card on the table. "You have 24 hours to decide. After that, I stop playing nice." As Ian walked away, Christopher called after him. "Even if you destroy me, you still lose." "She's gone, Ian. She chose to leave rather than fight for what you had. What does that tell you about how much she really loved you?" Ian paused at the bar's entrance, the words hitting their intended target. But when he turned back, his expression was serene. It tells me that she loved me enough to sacrifice her own happiness for mine. It tells me that she spent her entire adult life putting other people's needs before her own. And it tells me that it's time someone fought for her the way she's always fought for everyone else. 24 hours later, Ian stood outside a small apartment building in Burlington, Vermont, his pulse hammering against his ribs. It had taken his investigators 2 full weeks to track them down, following a trail of cash transactions and bus tickets that spoke of Jillian's desperate need to disappear. He climbed the stairs to apartment 3B, each step feeling like a lifetime. What if she refused to see him? What if the damage was too deep to repair? What if Christopher was right and her leaving meant she'd never really loved him at all? Ian raised his hand to knock, then froze as he heard a familiar voice through the thin door. "But why can't we go home, Mommy?" Rhonda's voice was small, confused. "I miss Daddy, Ian. I miss my room and my toys and Mrs. Chen from the daycare." "I know, sweetheart." Jillian's voice was thick with tears. "But sometimes we have to make hard choices to protect the people we love. Did Daddy Ian stop loving us?" The question was followed by silence, then the sound of muffled sobbing. Ian's heart shattered at the pain in those quiet tears. "No, baby," Jillian finally whispered. "Daddy Ian didn't stop loving us, but sometimes love isn't enough." Ian knocked then, unable to listen to any more without acting. The crying stopped immediately, and he heard whispered voices, movement, then cautious footsteps approaching the door. "Who is it?" Jillian's voice was wary. "It's me," Ian said simply. "It's Ian." The silence stretched so long that Ian began to wonder if she would refuse to open the door. Then he heard the chain sliding, the deadbolt turning. And suddenly, she was there. Jillian looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying, her face pale with stress and sleepless nights. She was wearing an old sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She had never looked more beautiful to him. "How did you find us?" she whispered, her voice carrying every mile of distance she'd tried to put between them. "The same way I finally learned to read," Ian said simply, his words heavy with meaning. "By refusing to give up on something that mattered more than my pride, more than my fear, more than every voice telling me I wasn't smart enough or strong enough to figure it out." He stepped closer, and she could see the exhaustion in his features, the cost of 2 weeks spent searching for the other half of his soul. "I'll always find you, Jillian. No matter where you go, no matter how far you run. You're not just the woman I love. You're the language I finally learned to speak." "Daddy Ian," Rhonda's voice erupted from behind Jillian, and suddenly the little girl was launching herself into his arms, tears streaming down her face. "You came. You came for us." Ian lifted her, holding her tight against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Of course I came, Princess. Did you really think I would let you go?" "Mommy said we had to leave to protect you," Rhonda sobbed into his shoulder. "She said the bad people wanted to hurt you because of us." "The bad people can't hurt me," Ian said firmly, his eyes meeting Jillian's over Rhonda's head. "Because the people I love are stronger than anything they can throw at us." Jillian was crying now, her hand pressed to her mouth. "Ian, you don't understand. Christopher, the media, your company—" "Is fine," Ian interrupted. "Christopher withdrew his custody suit this morning. He also issued a public apology admitting that his claims were false and that he has no parental rights to Rhonda." Jillian stared at him. "How did you—" "It turns out that bullies are usually cowards underneath. Apply the right pressure and they crumble." Ian's voice softened. "But more importantly, it turns out that DNA tests don't lie. Christopher was never Rhonda's father, Jillian. Whatever happened 8 years ago, however he convinced you otherwise, He lied to you then just like he was lying to you now. The words hit Jillian like a physical blow. She sank onto her small couch, her legs giving out. That's not possible. It's not only possible, it's fact. I have the test results. Ian sat beside her, still holding Rhonda, who was now listening with wide, curious eyes. He used your inexperience and trust against you, manipulated you into believing something that was never true. Then who? Jillian's voice trailed off. I don't know, and it doesn't matter. What matters is that Rhonda is yours, completely and absolutely. No one can take her from you. No one. Jillian looked at her daughter, seeing Christopher's absence in every feature she'd once imagined she saw. Rhonda had her eyes, her stubborn chin, her gentle spirit. She was hers alone, had always been hers alone. I left you, she whispered to Ian. I ran away instead of fighting. You tried to protect me, Ian corrected gently. You sacrificed your own happiness to save mine. That's not running away, Jillian. That's love. But the scandal, your reputation, will recover. My board stood behind me when I explained the situation. The media is already moving on to the next story, and frankly, I don't care what anyone thinks about us as long as we're together. Ian shifted Rhonda to one arm and reached for Jillian with the other, pulling her close. I love you. Both of you. Nothing else matters. I love you too, Jillian whispered against his chest. I'm sorry I ran. I'm sorry I didn't trust us enough to fight. Then come home with me, Ian said simply. Come home and let's build the life we were meant to have. As Jillian looked into his eyes, she saw everything she'd been afraid to hope for: acceptance, devotion, and the kind of love that doesn't give up when things get difficult. Yes, she whispered. Let's go home. Outside their small apartment, snow began to fall, but inside, surrounded by the warmth of love reclaimed and family reunited, none of them noticed the cold. Chapter 10. Love Conquers All. The greatest love stories don't end with happily ever after. They begin with it, as two hearts choose each other every day and build a lifetime of beautiful tomorrows. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the Fifth Avenue bridal boutique, casting rainbow prisms across the silk and lace that surrounded them. Jillian stood before the three-way mirror, hardly recognizing the radiant woman staring back at her. The wedding dress was perfect, elegant but not ostentatious, classic but not outdated. The ivory silk fell in gentle waves to the floor, while the delicate lace sleeves and modest neckline gave her the grace of a princess without the pretension of a queen. It was everything she'd dreamed of as a little girl, but had stopped believing she deserved. Mommy, you look like a fairy tale princess, Rhonda breathed from her perch on the velvet ottoman, her dark eyes wide with wonder. At 7 now, she was all legs and curls and boundless excitement about becoming Ian's real daughter in just 2 weeks. Do I? Jillian laughed, smoothing the silk with nervous hands. I feel like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life. You're not playing anything, said Margaret Chen, the boutique owner who had become a friend over the months of planning. You're claiming the happiness you've always deserved. Through the mirror, Jillian caught sight of the small velvet box sitting on the dressing room table. Ian's grandmother's engagement ring, an Art Deco masterpiece he'd placed on her finger 3 months ago during a quiet dinner at home. The proposal had been perfect in its simplicity. No grand gestures or public spectacles, just Ian dropping to one knee in their living room, while Rhonda helped by holding the ring box and trying not to giggle. Will you marry me, Jillian Sharman? He'd asked, his gray eyes bright with love and hope. Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that fairy tales can come true? Her answer had been immediate and tearful. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Now, looking at herself in her wedding dress, Jillian could hardly believe that day was finally here. Mrs. Nichols to be, Margaret said with a warm smile. I think we have a perfect fit. Your groom is going to forget how to breathe when he sees you." "I hope so," Jillian laughed, then caught Rhonda's reflection in the mirror. "What do you think, sweetheart? Will Daddy Ian like it?" "He'll love it because you're wearing it," Rhonda said with 7-year-old wisdom. "Just like he loves everything about you." The simple truth of it made Jillian's eyes fill with tears. Ian did love everything about her, her past, her struggles, her dreams, even her fears. He'd proven it over and over in the months since they'd returned from Vermont, building their life together with patient devotion. He'd handled the remaining media attention with grace and firmness, making it clear that anyone who wanted access to him professionally would need to respect his family personally. The story had died quickly once Christopher's lies were exposed, replaced by a more accurate narrative of love triumphing over adversity. More importantly, Ian had kept every promise he'd made. He'd adopted Rhonda legally, giving her his name and all the security that came with it. He'd encouraged Jillian to return to school, and she was now just 1 semester away from completing her literature degree. He'd moved them into a house in the suburbs, not the Manhattan penthouse she'd expected, but a beautiful colonial with a big backyard where Rhonda could play and the promised puppy could run. "Are you ready to see the final touches?" Margaret asked, reaching for the cathedral-length veil that would complete the ensemble. As Margaret secured the veil in Jillian's dark hair, now styled in an elegant updo with soft curls framing her face, Jillian felt the last of her disbelief fade away. This was really happening. In 2 weeks she would walk down the aisle of St. Patrick's Cathedral and marry the man who had transformed her life with his love. "Perfect," Margaret declared, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "Absolutely perfect." 2 weeks later, Jillian stood at the back of St. Patrick's Cathedral, her hand resting on her father-in-law-to-be's arm. Harold Whitfield had volunteered to walk her down the aisle, a gesture that had moved her to tears when he'd offered. "Nervous?" he asked kindly, his earlier skepticism about their relationship long since replaced by genuine affection. "Terrified," Jillian admitted with a shaky laugh. "What if I trip? What if I forget my vows? What if... What if you just focus on the man waiting for you at the altar?" Harold suggested gently. "Because I can tell you from 30 years of friendship, I've never seen Ian look at anything the way he looks at you." Jillian lifted her eyes to the front of the cathedral, where Ian stood waiting in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. Even from this distance, she could see the love and anticipation written across his face. Beside him, Marcus Riverstone stood as best man, while Rhonda fidgeted excitedly in her junior bridesmaid dress, the basket of rose petals in her hands. The organ began the opening notes of Canon in D, and Jillian felt her nerves settle into joy. This was right. This was perfect. This was the beginning of everything she'd ever wanted. As they began their walk down the aisle, Jillian was dimly aware of the faces turning toward her. Colleagues from Ian's company, friends from Rhonda's school, neighbors from their new life. But her eyes were fixed on Ian, watching his expression transform from anticipation to awe to something that looked suspiciously like tears. When Harold placed her hand in Ian's at the altar, the older man whispered, "Take care of her, son." "Always," Ian replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Always." The ceremony passed in a blur of beautiful words and heartfelt promises. They'd written their own vows, and when it came time to speak them, Jillian's voice was clear and strong. "Ian, you found me when I was lost, believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, and loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You didn't just save my life, you gave me a life worth living. I promise to love you with the same fierce devotion you've shown me, to build our dreams together, and to never stop marveling at the miracle of being chosen by you." Ian's vows were equally heartfelt. "Gillian, you taught me that love isn't a weakness to be avoided, but a strength to be embraced. You showed me that a family isn't just about blood, but about choice, commitment, and daily acts of love. I promise to choose you every day, to protect our family with everything I have, and to spend the rest of my life proving that fairy tales can come true. When Father McKenna pronounced them husband and wife, Ian's kiss was tender and reverent, full of promises for all the years to come. The cathedral erupted in applause, but Gillian barely heard it over the sound of her own heart singing with joy. "I love you, Mrs. Nichols," Ian whispered against her lips. "I love you too, Mr. Nichols," she whispered back, and both of them laughed at the beautiful impossibility of it all. The reception at the Plaza Hotel was everything Gillian had never dared dream of, elegant without being ostentatious, intimate despite the 100 guests, perfect in every detail that mattered. But her favorite moment came during the father-daughter dance, when Ian swept Rhonda onto the dance floor for their special song. "You know," Rhonda said seriously as Ian spun her around, "I think this is the best day ever. Even better than my birthday with all the presents." "Even better than chocolate cake," Ian teased. "Even better than chocolate cake," Rhonda confirmed solemnly, "because now we're a real family forever and ever." "Even gladder than I am?" Ian asked with a smile. "Maybe not gladder," Rhonda conceded thoughtfully, "but really, really, really glad. Like, the most glad I've ever been about anything, except maybe getting Mr. Bunny for my birthday." "Me too, Princess. Me too." Watching them together, her husband and her daughter, now legally his daughter too, Gillian felt her cup of happiness overflow. They were a family in every sense of the word, bound not by accident of birth, but by deliberate choice and daily love. Later, as the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Ian and Gillian stood on the hotel's terrace, looking out over Central Park. Rhonda had fallen asleep in Ian's arms, her flower girl dress rumpled and her face peaceful. "So, Mrs. Nichols," Ian said softly, "how does it feel to be married to a billionaire?" Gillian pretended to consider the question seriously. "Well, the money's nice, but I have to say, I'm really just here for the man." "Lucky for me," Ian laughed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Because you're stuck with me now. No more running away." "No more running away," Gillian agreed, then looked up at him with sparkling eyes. "Though I should warn you, you're about to be stuck with me for even longer than you planned." "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, Gillian reached into her small beaded purse and pulled out a small wrapped box. "I have a wedding gift for you." Ian shifted Rhonda carefully to one arm and accepted the box with curious eyes. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a tiny pair of baby shoes in soft yellow. "Gillian," he breathed, his eyes going wide. "Are you?" "2 months," she said, her smile radiant. "I found out 2 weeks ago, but I wanted to wait until after the wedding to tell you. I wanted today to be perfect, for just the three of us first." Ian stared at the baby shoes, then at his wife, then at the sleeping daughter in his arms. "Another baby," he said wonderingly. "Our baby." "Our baby," Gillian confirmed. "Are you happy?" Instead of answering with words, Ian kissed her deeply, pouring all his joy and love and gratitude into the connection between them. When they broke apart, both were crying happy tears. "I love you," he said simply, "all of you, more than I ever thought it was possible to love. Even when there are three of us demanding your attention," Gillian teased. "Especially then," Ian said seriously. "Bring on the chaos, Mrs. Nichols. I'm ready for all of it." As they stood there on the terrace, holding each other and their daughter under the stars, Gillian marveled at how far they'd come from that night in his office, when she'd been a broken woman trying to hold her small world together with dignity and hope. Now she was a wife, a mother, and soon to be a mother again. She had love, security, and a future bright with possibilities. But more than that, she had a partner who saw her truly, loved her completely, and would stand with her through whatever joys and challenges lay ahead. "What are you thinking about?" Ian asked softly. "Just all of it," Gillian said, leaning into his warmth. "How impossible this all seemed just a year ago. How scared I was to believe it could be real. And now? Now I know that sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, the universe gives you exactly what you need exactly when you need it, even if it comes disguised as a cruel translation test in a billionaire's office." Ian laughed softly. "Remind me to thank my grandmother for leaving me that letter. If she hadn't, I might never have discovered how brilliant my cleaning lady was." "Your cleaning lady?" Gillian raised an eyebrow. "I'll have you know I'm a respectable married woman now, and a college student, and soon to be the mother of your children, plural. All of which makes me the luckiest man alive," Ian said, his voice full of wonder and gratitude. As they finally made their way inside, Rhonda stirring sleepily in Ian's arms, Gillian looked back once at the glittering city beyond the terrace windows. Somewhere out there, other people were struggling, hoping, dreaming of love and second chances. She sent a small prayer into the night that they would find what she had found. Not the fairy tale ending she'd once imagined, but something better. A love built on truth, tested by adversity, and strong enough to create its own happily ever after, one beautiful day at a time. The elevator doors closed on their reflection, husband, wife, daughter, and the promise of new life growing between them, and carried them up toward home, toward forever, toward all the tomorrows love had made possible. The end. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the most painful chapters, proving that hearts brave enough to hope again will always find their way home to each other.